Well, thanks everybody. We appreciate you all coming down. We're going to keep this, we're actually going to do it a little bit different this year. In the past, I'll talk about, whether some of the new things or technologies and stuff. We'll touch upon that a little bit, but, we figured, especially, with everything going on in the last few years and just an opportunity to, just talk fishing. We're going to leave this open. This is actually going to be kind of an unscripted, informal, just a Q&A, an opportunity for you to ask questions, anything that you want to talk about, whether it's fishing techniques or tactics or anything from lures and rods and reels to, of course, electronics. I'll open it up a little bit. We'll talk a bit about 360 and Mega Live and give you a sneak peek on, some of the other, things to come, as far as mapping goes. But this is really just an opportunity to, be able to connect with you and, say thanks for, we appreciate all your business and everything, and really just to chat fishing, answer questions. If there are any questions right off the top that any of you might have, feel free to fire away, or I can just lead into it and we'll just let things happen as they come up.
Looks like availability is getting better.
Yeah, it is, and that's really that's a great, starter, because that's been a struggle that we've been dealing with for, the industry as a whole. Gosh, I bought a new vehicle, a year ago, and I'm still waiting for a couple chips for it, right? And I don't know when that'll be, when I'll get it, but hey, at least I got a vehicle, right? It's been a struggle across the board, from epoxies, resins, critical chips and components, and sometimes some of the parts that are used across a lot of different industries. It's really just a matter what you program those chips or widgets for. So the demand, I remember even one situation where I think it had something to do with, for some of the products where, we have suppliers as well, right? So let's say it's for packaging for the cardboard box, but then when all of a sudden, as an example, their supplier runs out of ink, right? So we can't print the boxes that supply the boxes for us to package everything. It's such a trickle-down effect, right? So we've certainly come out the other end of it. We've got a warehouse full of product right now. We're shipping, as you can see. There's the odd product that might be a little bit delayed. I know with some of the Ultrex trolling motors, those might be a little bit behind. I know for your area here, that's not as, big of a deal. Solix units and Apex units, those might be a little bit behind as well, but I tell you, we sure have a lot of, Helix units in stock, and, we're shipping. So we're definitely, in a better position. The industry as a whole is in a better position. So, we're certainly looking forward to, being able to facilitate all the needs that everybody's looking for the upcoming years. So, some pretty good promos as well, when we talk about with Mega Live. We've got the information on the front desk where if you purchased a Helix 9 and 10, they're with a Mega Live system, whether it's a transducer or the universal, there is a $500 mail-in rebate. If it's a 12 or a 15 Helix with one of the Mega Lives, that's actually a $1,000 rebate. We've never had anything like that in the past, right? So again, it's just kind of our way of, saying thanks, especially because of availability. With Mega Live, when we first introduced it, it was pretty hard to get it. We had limited quantities available, so we're working through it, but this is the Apex. When you look at sort of the hierarchy of the line, whether it's from, the basic, Piranha Max to the Helix series to the Solix, Solix, which gets you into your touchscreen units or your cross touch, right? So you can still use the buttons and the touch functions, as well as, more advanced menu functions. There's a lot that you can do with Solix. What Apex is, which is what we have right here, Apex is very similar to the Solix, but the difference is what I like about the Apex is you have dual Ethernet. So for example, if you're, typically what you would do is if you're running multiple Ethernet systems where you can connect whether your iPilot link, your Mega Live, maybe you want to network different units together. If you go anything beyond 2 Ethernet systems, 2 head units, or let's say you add iPilot link or Mega Live, you have to get our Ethernet box, right? Our Ethernet hub, the 5-station switch, right? With Apex, what you can do is you can plug Mega Live in one of the Ethernet connections, and then you can get the other Ethernet cable, and you can basically just link that to another unit. We actually did that a couple weeks ago when I was fishing on Lake Winnipeg with one of our pro staff, Matt Hobson from Icebound Excursions. He has a Snow Bear fleet that he has out on Lake Winnipeg. So what we were actually able to do is we had the Apex unit because we wanted to test a few different things out, and then I brought one of my Helix 10s. So we were actually using the Apex unit connected with the Mega Live, and then I ran the Ethernet cable to the Helix 10, and we were able to view the Mega Live imaging on the Helix 10, which is, a similar application where if somebody wants to use it in a in a wheelhouse or, the ice castles or different things like that. What you can do because of the HDMI, that's the other thing that Apex has, is it has HDMI in or HDMI out. We were playing around with it earlier with the HDMI in from the camera. Is we connected one of the AquaView cameras. You can do the same thing with a Markham. So you connect the HDMI, so instead of looking at the smaller camera screen, you've actually got the camera view here on your Apex, and it's just a direct HDMI connection. It actually worked really, really well. I know that AquaView system that they have, where it's basically just kind of the module with the camera itself, so there's no screen, that's one of the ones that I connected to test it out, and you can just take the direct HDMI connection right into here, and now you've got a full 13-inch display right on your screen, and you can still set up your screen split. So if you wanted to have your map screen or your 2D sonar and then maybe one of the smaller windows as your camera, as you're dropping the camera down, really cool to be able to do that. So having HDMI in and out, I use this as well when I'm doing, sort of web presentations, Zoom calls and stuff, because with my Ethernet or my HDMI switcher on my computer, I can actually have this plugged into and basically act as like another web camera, so I can just toggle between the different channels. So now everything that I'm doing on the screen, you'll actually see on the presentation, when I'm doing web presentations. So it's a pretty neat function.
You could also broadcast that on your ice shack on a TV as well.
Absolutely. And that's what a lot of people are doing, right? They're taking their flat screen TVs so that they can have a bigger viewing area, whether it's just nice to see the bigger screens or for outfitters, for your clients, instead of all huddling around a smaller screen. You can have a nice view. Just hook the HDMI right up to the TV monitor, and you can have a nice big view. So it'll clone the screen. Everything you see on the screen is just in a big flat screen in the ice house. So, yeah, pretty neat application. So, from Helix to Solix to Apex, which gets you into dual Ethernet, and then HDMI in and out. Some of the other technologies you can actually see on this screen right here, which is Mega 360. This really has, we've had it for a while now, but I think when people start to appreciate the benefits of what 360 imaging does, as you know, with side imaging, it's that sort of lay of the land perspective. You put the boat in gear, you drive, and you can get a really wide top-down view, especially when you want to see bottom transitions, rock piles. Of course, you can see fish as well. Down imaging has its place. A really good type of imaging, especially to supplement what you view on your 2D sonar, your 2D chirp. It'll actually help you interpret your 2D chirp sonar from what you see on your down imaging, your Mega DI. What I like about 360 is you don't actually have to be moving. So you can be spot locked, or you can be parked on a spot, and you can see a 360-degree view, or if you want to isolate a certain area. For ice fishing, the one thing to note about if you're using Mega 360 for ice fishing, because you have the pole and the pod that you would lower down the hole, just because you do have that moving transducer on the bottom, you just want to make sure that that doesn't freeze. Now, it's not going to damage it if it does happen to freeze. It's just that it won't work, right? Because once ice starts to freeze and the water starts to freeze, so you just want to make sure that you keep it warm. So if you're in a heated shelter, not going to be an issue. When I'm ice fishing, or if we're running and gunning, I just make sure that when I take it out of the hole, that it goes back into the vehicle or whatever it is to keep that pod warm. The great thing about using this, for example, in an ice fishing application, typically what you would do, and I'll just use, for me back home in the Winnipeg area, Lake Winnipeg. Same thing can apply here, on Last Mountain Lake or any of the other bodies of water. When you're going to try to find fish, especially on a lot of these bigger bodies of water, what do? You drop a lure down, you got your ice Helix unit or your flasher, whatever you're using, and you fish for a little bit. Okay, 15, 20 minutes, there's nothing here. And then you punch another couple holes. You fish for a little bit. Now, when you add up all the time that it can take to do that, that's a lot of time in the day. And talking to some of our outfitters that are running Mega 360 imaging on Lake Winnipeg, they're telling me that they're literally saving about a half a day's fishing time, and they can get on the fish so much quicker. Because what they can do is they can literally punch a hole, they can drop Mega 360 down, and just as this screen refreshes here, right away they can see there's either fish there or not. And there's a lot of really good screen views that'll show that. Whether it's just a flat featureless bottom, you can see the bait, you can see those fish. They show up really well on Mega 360. So when you drill your hole and you don't see anything on the screen, don't fish it. Move on to the next spot until you actually find those schools of fish. And it works so well, and it's so efficient, it's saving you time so that you're actually going to stay and be on the fish. We'll use it the same way too for You know, when we're fishing for, I mean, you can do it for perch, but, you know, again, for us back home when we're targeting crappie, a lot of the times those fish are moving. They're just kind of schools that are swimming around the lake and that sort of thing. So you can be on them, and then all of a sudden the bites start to, you know, slow down a little bit. Well, with Mega 360, same thing with live that we'll talk about as well, is that you can literally follow them all around. So you can basically stay on that school or locate another school, start tracking that one. So you're always going to be on the fish. It's such a great tool to basically cut down the time that you have to search the fish. And then of course, when you look at, actually, you tell them about when we were up on the lake there with the fire department. That was pretty cool.
360 is very cool. I can honestly say 360 will probably be one of my next purchases. I've had a chance to use it a couple times now, and it's very impressive. Both off the boat and on the ice. We actually recently set up the Regina Fire Department and their search and rescue team with a setup, basically for, you know, I guess it would be more recovery than anything, but, you know, searching for bodies or searching for vehicles or anything that's gone under. So we set them up a pole. Darrin came out. It was actually a really interesting day.
Yeah, it was.
So they were doing some ice diving, and we got that down on there, and they were looking for a car, and we basically located the car almost instantly. So
yeah, they gave us a general area. They said,
yeah.
well, it's because here's where they had their shack, and it's like, well, it's kind of over there. So we drilled a hole, then it's like, yep, there it is.
Within one refresh, we had located that, and then they started doing their diving. Well, basically, we were on the divers instantly. At first, you could see the bubbles, and then all of a sudden, oh, he comes on screen, and we could see their dive. We could see the divers clear as day. We'll post video and pictures on that later. But yeah, super cool being able to track their diver as they go to the car. Like, they were extremely impressed. We were even watching fish come and go on the screen, and with nothing. Like, it was a brand new unit, dropped in the water, turned it on, and right out of the box, like locating fish, locating objects, super impressive.
Especially because in that situation, when you're ice fishing, you're in a very stationary area, like nothing's going to change. So if all of a sudden you see a target here, and then as it refreshes, well, that target's not there anymore, well, of course, that was a fish. You can see fish moving. Once you get, you know, the lay of the land with the rubble and the boulders and whatever else is there on the bottom, anything that changes from that, you can distinguish really quickly whether it's bait fish or smaller fish or larger fish.
One thing I really, really thought was interesting was when we dropped down and you could see the rock points. And it was just like, you're ice fishing, so same as you use your side scan on your boat to locate structure. Well, we dropped down and okay, well, look at this rock finger.
Yeah.
It's like you could so easily position yourself on structure. It's foolish almost.
And I would imagine probably the same as back home with some of the lakes in western Manitoba, but particularly with a lot of the lakes here, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the spots, just because you can see, you know, the way the shape of the lakes, let's just use, you know, the Capel Lakes, for example, is that any areas where you have those points, right, typically there's usually a little bit of rock or rubble associated with it, but sometimes you might have these areas where it's just kind of a nothing shoreline. But you don't realize that underneath that, maybe there's a little bit of a rock finger or just that transition. Everybody's going to fish the obvious spots, right? Whether what you see on your sonar, but sometimes you have these spots that are just off the edge where you won't otherwise notice it. When you can see those transitions where you have those little gravel fingers that come out, you know where to park on them.
Even the holes and all the, you know, even the low spots, anything a fish could sit in, you definitely won't pick that up with your camera or with your regular
The spring of the year when the fish are moving up the bays or the coulees and stuff like that, imagine having something like 360 where I've actually used this in a tournament like that, and it's been awesome because, you know, the boat's going to huddle up because you all know where you want to be fishing. And I can be parked. I remember seeing this one time. We were fishing Lac de Bonnie, and it was myself, and we're all together. There was a whole bunch of boats all around us, and, you know, you're plucking the odd walleye here and there. And I could actually see, okay, there's on the 360, there's some fish, okay, right over there. So I'm just kind of casually, you know, take it off spot lock, and I'm, you know, maneuvering the boat, parking over there. Then, okay, yeah, there's one. I could see amongst all the boats where those fish were, and you can reposition yourself accordingly, you know. Yep, absolutely. Because the way that it's set here, in this particular setup that you see on the screen, it's a little bit hard for you to see right now, but you can set the range. So the range is actually set to 80 feet. You can set it to, that's exactly it. So you can set it to 80 feet or 100 feet or further. For myself, I typically don't set it beyond 100 feet. Even in a big wide lake, a wide flat body of water like Lake Winnipeg, you might think, well, set it as wide as you can. Well, that's not necessarily the best way. 100 feet is usually the typical max range that I'll set it. Most of the time I'll draw it in a little bit, because when you spread that much data over that much area, there's too much there. It gets compressed a bit too much, right? So when you actually bring it into 80 feet, sometimes 60, more in a localized area, you'll see that it actually blows that up and almost zooms it in and enhances it. And in fact, what I'll usually do is I'll give it 1 or 2 clicks like that, depending how I want to view it. But it's nice that you can set your range. You've also got range rings, so you can see 20, 40, 60, 80. So if you happen to see a little boulder pile and maybe you spot lock on that area, you can basically see, okay, right on, okay, 60 feet, 2 o'clock, that's where I'm gonna cast. You know, it's amazing to have that perspective where instantaneously you have that lay of the land. So some people will ask, okay, I understand, okay, Mega 360, pretty cool, Mega Live, you know, really cool as well, but which one would you take if given the choice? Well, that's a really hard decision because they both have their, it's like telling a golfer to, well, would you get rid of your sand wedge or would you, well, you kind of need it, especially in certain applications, right? Same thing with certain types of presentations or certain fishing rods. This serves a really cool application to give you that top-down lay of the land perspective. I guess if you really could only choose one theoretically, well, okay, I'd probably go Mega Live, but it'd be really hard. It'd be a tough decision for me to take, you know, 360 away from me just for the benefits, you know, that it really serves, because you can use this for that lay of the land perspective, you know, to find fish, and then you use your Mega Live to kind of go in and snipe them, right? You know, target them specifically as you see them on the screen.
I think you'll see this pop up here a lot more in the coming years. Bass guys have been using it pretty hard, and I don't think there's a professional bass fisherman fishing without it right now, regardless what brand they represent. 360 is definitely an absolute weapon. So
absolutely, for sure. And that of course takes us into, you know, Mega Live as well, and you've used, you know, Mega Live a fair bit. I remember when before it was actually when it just got released, when we were up on you know, the lake they're using it, that was actually my first time using it as well. So we all saw it at the same time. And I think one of the things that, you know, whatever your flavor, you know, Ford, Chevy, Coke, Pepsi, whatever, same thing, of course, with marine electronics. But one of the things that really set Humminbird Mega Live imaging apart, I kind of broke it down into 3 ways, where you've got your detail and your clarity and the simplicity. Well, especially from when we were on the water, what we can see right out of the gate, I mean, the detail, when you can see these walleyes coming in, when you can see the dorsal fin, and remember that screenshot that I did where there was a walleye that took a swipe at a bait, and you could actually see when I froze it, because it was a video recording, that you could actually see the mouth open of this walleye going and taking a swipe at the bait. So, okay, check that box, it's got the detail, right? The clarity, that really was one of the things that set Mega Live imaging apart, is because you don't have that heavy segmentation and coning, you don't have all that ghosting and stuff, even where the bottom kind of fades and then it reappears and fades and reappears. Solid bottom all the way, really clear imaging, just like what you can see here, is that we didn't do too much in the settings, where we just adjusted our contrast and sensitivity, and it was clean across the board. So clarity, that checked a huge box where you don't have all that clutter and stuff that you're fighting with.
absolutely. And for me, like, it was the simplicity of how easy that came. It was right out of the box. That was day one. We'd never seen it. We built a makeshift pole to make it work, and literally right out of the box, we were locating fish almost instantaneously.
Yeah.
And then went on an absolute rampage with the jig that day, and just put fish after fish in the boat. It was actually quite something to see. But drop in, power on, and it was that easy. Like, there was, obviously you can fine tune, but it's just a very simple, easy to use. Like, it seems advanced. It seems like it's technical, but honestly, anybody can do it. It's plug and play. At the end of the day, you spend a little bit of time tinkering with it, and it will put more fish in your boat. For
sure. And you mentioned about simplicity. You know, the overwhelming factor of simplicity that I found is it's just when you look at the connection and how easy it is to, I mean, it's 2 wires, right? There's your transducer wire, which is your Ethernet cable, and there's your power cable. That's it. There's no black box, there's no other module. I mean, the transducer, it is not just a transducer. There's processing. Obviously, when you do your software updates and so on, that actually sends that update through the connections, through the head unit into the transducer. So it's kind of like a computer in and of itself. So just by having those 2 wires, you know, for the connection, it is such a simple system to use, and particularly when you use the portable configuration for ice fishing, right? Our Ice Helix 9, you know, MSI with Mega Live bundle. I mean, it's all just right there, nice and light and self-contained. The great thing about that bundle in and of itself is, while you're getting a Helix 9 MSI, but when you actually kind of break down the value of what you're getting, right? Mega Live is a couple $1,000s in and of itself. Well, it's also a couple $1,000s for the head unit, and then the shuttle, and then the battery, and then the pole, and the mounts, and so on. So for what that would actually cost you to part it out separately is a fair bit more than what you're actually having to pay. So that Ice Helix 9 Mega Live bundle, particularly if you're looking for something as an all-season use, you only need a handful of parts if you want to convert that over into your boat for summertime. So a lot of people have kind of gone that route where they'll get that Ice Helix 9 bundle, right? The one thing that I will say with Mega Live as well is that it's still the same Mega Live with all the various iterations out there. I mean, Mega Live speaks for itself because, you know, aside from a few updates here and there, it's still the same transducer and configuration and wires, right? It's really, we're just talking about software. So for example, whereas other brands might have updated, you know, better clarity and performance and certain things, well, if you want that, you got to buy the next version, which is actually a hardware upgrade. So you got to spend a couple $1,000s plus to get that upgrade, which is where, you know, Mega Live already is. While with all the software updates, and whether it's range and detail and performance and other things that have been enhanced with it, what does it cost you to get that? Absolutely nothing, right? Because it's just a simple software update, particularly for where Mega Live is right now. And I remember when we were testing it out, actually, it was last summer, and there's been a couple software updates even since then. I wanted to check it out to see, okay, what are we looking at as far as effective range of being able to see the bottom all the way? So remember when we positioned the boat off the shore, I put it in forward mode. I angled it forward, I think at about 50 or 60 degrees, because the maximum scale, whether it's the depth or the scale, the range that you can set it to is 150 feet. You can't adjust it further than that. Whether it can read further or not, I mean, that's the maximum scale that you can see on the screen. So I set it in forward mode, I set it to 150 feet, and it's like, yep, I can see just behind me, and it was a solid line all the way on the bottom, all the way out to 150 feet, like a solid bottom, except right at around the 140 range or so, the bottom started getting a little bit choppy, but even at that, I mean, we're talking 150 feet, and we can see fish past 100 feet swimming around and stuff like that. So, I mean, what more do you want? So it definitely checks all the boxes for performance and features, and especially where, where it's at right now and some of the recent software updates, it's only gonna get better from there. So, I mean, it's legit. For any of you that might have followed the Bassmaster Classic, you know, Jeff Gustafson, I mean, first Canadian, I mean, a big deal, right? Winning the Bassmaster Classic. I mean, that was awesome. I was fortunate to actually be down there. But wasn't it cool for those of you that might have been watching it, where he was using an Apex system and they had the HDMI out connected to a live feed. So you can see right on the screen exactly what he was looking at. And I remember looking at the screen where it's like, oh, just as he's kind of look, oh, there's one, you know, did he see it or not? It was really cool to be able to track that. But what did you notice is that, look at how well he could see those fish come up, how they reacted to the bait, how clear his screen was. He had that forward mode set to 90 feet. I think it was 80 or 90 feet. And it was a solid clear bottom all the way, whatever direction that he scanned. So it's legit. Any of us that use Mega Live, we already know that, right? But that was something that I think certainly opened a lot of people's eyes as far as where, you know, we got something good here.
I had one day last year in particular that really struck home for me. I was actually out filming with my friend Colin, and it was a slack water day, mid or late September, and beautiful day, absolutely gorgeous day, but fish were not cooperating whatsoever. We were absolutely hammering the day before. So, okay, Colin, come out. We're going to go filming today. It's going to be great. Well, by noon, I don't think we had a fish in the boat. So, change tactics. Let's go up north. Cruising around real slow and just was not marking them on my 2D sonar. Like, nothing against it, but I was not seeing them register on my sonar. So, I was like, let's slow down. I dropped my Mega Live. I hadn't been doing it. I was trying to sharpshoot all morning. And all of a sudden, I was picking them up off the bottom. So I was running it in down mode so I could see forward and behind me. And we got this all on video. It'll probably come out pretty quickly here. And all of a sudden I could start seeing marks register that I wasn't catching on my 2D sonar. So like, okay, well, this is interesting. So I got my jig, and they were just going real quick, and I had it. Finally, I said, okay, this looks like a nice mark. Grabbed my jig, and it was, as soon as it went past, it was gone. And I flipped past, basically instantaneously, 29-inch walleye hooked up. Got it in the boat, barely done dealing with it. Here comes another mark flying past on the Mega Live. Grabbed my other rod, I had a wrap rod right beside it, flipped the wrap back at it, whack, hit another tank, back to back. Just, sometimes you just gotta switch things up a little bit different, and just depending on how they're laying, like the Mega Live, it doesn't miss nothing. It's
For sure.
absolutely wild. I'm actually really excited for that video to drop.
You know, to that as well, one of the neat things that you could really gain a perspective of with Mega Live is seeing how the fish are responding to your presentation, right? Especially whether it's open water, but for those of you that have used it for ice fishing, is you can see how those fish are coming in. I mean, maybe it's just your cadence and how you're working the lure. Maybe it's the color, maybe it's the type of bait, maybe it's you're using a rattle bait and that's actually what's drawing them in, but they don't really want to hit it. Then all of a sudden you got a deadline beside you with a jig and a minnow or something like that, or a jig and a whatever you're using, and that's what they actually bite, right? So it gives you a really good idea of how they're responding. And the neat thing that I remember that sticks in my mind is, again, fishing Lake Winnipeg, where a lot of those times, I mean, it's weird how, I mean, you have these big walleye, they'll come up to you, and then of course the trick is you just kind of raise it up, try to tease them, and of course try to get them, you know, off the bottom and chasing it. Once they're either going to hit it or not, but once, the more they separate from the bottom, the more they kind of instinctively think that, okay, I better do something here. I remember seeing some of these walleye where we'll pull them off the bottom, and I can just see this guy like this, and especially when you're fishing shallow, where, I mean, he's not going to go like, he's just going to go like this. And I remember seeing these walleye where they're just kind of like sleeping whales or whatever. I think I remember seeing that on a video, so that might be a good analogy. Is that they just kind of go up, and they're literally, these walleye were just like straight vertical, and they're right below the bait, right? And all they needed to do is just open their mouth and their gills, and they just, your bait's gone. So a lot of times you don't feel those hits because all they're doing is they're just flushing water into their mouth and your bait's gone, as opposed to when they crush it sideways, you're going to feel that thump. But it was neat to see them, how they actually responded to your presentation, and how in some cases you actually needed to change up and do something different to get them to bite. That's the great thing with Mega Live, is, you know, showing you how those fish are actually reacting to your presentations.
When you actually have the opportunity to finesse them, like very similar to how you would ice fish and work them up, them up off the bottom. I worked a fish as high as 15 feet off bottom with a jigging wrap. Like something you would never really think to do off the boat, but they keep coming for it, and eventually they get uncomfortable. They're either going to eat it or beat it.
Sure.
Yeah.
One little trick that I want to tell you about when you're using Mega Live, particularly for ice fishing, and I don't have one here to show you, but for those of you that have used it, you might know what I'm talking about, where when you have it mounted on your pole, I pretty much use like the pole as the center line here, right? So your Mega Live is going to be mounted, you know, on one side of the pole here. What I recommend, and I refer the front face, so imagine this being in down mode, right? Because, you know, you can angle the transducer forward or down. So down mode is straight down like that. One of the mistakes that I sometimes see people do is that when they're fishing, especially if they're using it in the same hole that they're fishing out of, or maybe they have their hole drilled a foot or two away, what I really recommend is that where the pole is, I call that kind of the back of the transducer. And then the side that the transducer is actually mounted on, there's like that front face, right? So what you have to make sure of is, if this is facing you here, you know, the audience, and the pole is down the hole, make sure that that transducer, when you're using it in down mode, is facing towards you. The reason is because if I turn this sideways here, if you look at the relative angle of the beam from the center line of the pole, it's actually a sharper angle, right? Whereas it actually comes off the front at a wider angle like that. So imagine, especially if your pole's off angle like that, you can actually take that pole, and if you don't, you know, believe what I'm saying, take that pole and actually just move it like that. You'll actually see, if your lure's right here and take that pole and move it, you'll see your lure disappear. Where you can take it this way and you can crank it all the way and you'll still see your lure, you know, under the beam there. So that kind of verifies the relative angle of that live imaging beam. So if you're actually fishing behind the transducer, right, while you're actually fishing out of the beam. And that becomes a particularly bigger issue where when you're fishing deeper, especially you hear this sometimes from lake trout guys where, oh, I lose the lure at 30 feet, 40 feet, whatever. Well, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to track your bait at 50, 60, 70 feet. It's all relative to that positioning. So what I will typically do is I won't usually use it. You can do it in shallow water this way, that's fine. But what I will typically do is I will always drill a separate hole. When you get something on your line, you don't have to take the pole out or it's not gonna get tangled. But this way, where if it's a foot or two in front of me and I'm fishing in front of the face of that transducer, I know that I'm fishing within that beam. If that's flipped around the other way. The other thing you gotta do too is when you go into your settings, you'll notice that you can change it from, port or starboard side. If you've got a rod here and a rod there, and then you're jigging this rod over here, and it's like, well, how come it shows on the screen the left side? Well, just go into your settings and change it, the other way. Because if it's on starboard, depending the side that you have it, if it's on starboard, change it back to port, then it's like, okay, what I see on my screen, I grab my right rod, okay, yep, it's showing up on the screen on the right side. But the important thing is just to make sure that you're fishing in front of the face of the transducer when you're using it on down mode. Because I've actually witnessed that a few times where, some anglers might be doing it the wrong way, so to speak, and they're wondering, well, how come I'm only fishing 30 feet of water and I can't track my jig? 35 feet of water, 30 feet of water fishing for crappie. 32nd ounce tungsten jig. That's a tiny, tiny jig, and I can see that thing all the way down. So, just a little tip as far as that goes. Any questions so far?
You answered my question right now, so I feel so stupid now.
Oh, no, not at all. No, we figured we'd just open up a few little topics to talk about.
There's a little bit of a learning curve to it, but honestly, positioning is the biggest thing. Once you get your positioning dialed in, once you learn, like Darrin says, watch where your line is. Once you learn how to tweak your sonar in the right direction, that is 90% of the battle. And there is a little practice required, but easy peasy.
Kind of a balance between your sensitivity and your contrast. You don't want to just crank your sensitivity, right? What I'll typically do is I'll use my sensitivity as a relative reference in terms of being able to track my lure. If I have my sensitivity so high that things are getting blown out, drop it down. If I can drop my sensitivity all the way down, even like 9, 8, 7, whatever, and I can still see my lure, that's good. You only need as much sensitivity is to be able to track your lure. And then what you do is you adjust your contrast, right? The lower the contrast, the more stuff you're gonna see, particularly in the water column. Maybe a little bit of clutter, right? If you take that contrast and you crank it right up, while a lot of those halos and clutters and stuff, it's gonna disappear, but you will also notice that some of the targets will also start to shrink and you're gonna get not as, sort of strong a signal. So it is a balance between your sensitivity and your contrast. I can actually live with a little bit of clutter and stuff in the screen, depending on how I wanna balance that sensitivity and contrast. But I will only use as much sensitivity as I need to be able to track my lure, because particularly when you are fishing deeper, then at least you have a baseline set, right? So okay, yeah, I'll crank my sensitivity a little bit more, I'll drop my contrast down. So once you play around with that, the other thing that I do, and this again is really just preferences, is I'll set my range or my depth, for example. I'll typically step out of the auto settings. So I'll set my range at a particular range. I'll set, if I'm fishing in down mode, I'll actually set it to down mode, although it will adjust it automatically. I will set it manually to down mode. If I move it back to forward mode, I will move it to forward mode. The other thing is that when you have the transducer in straight down mode, every click is 10 degrees. So by default, it might be 40 degrees, right? So that's 4 clicks like that in the forward mode. Well, especially if you're in shallower water or you want to track further out, right, ahead of you, if you are using it in forward mode, you may actually want to set it to 50 or 60 degrees. While if the angle's off kilter a little bit, maybe in auto mode, it might be off a little bit. So although it says 40 on the screen, but you have it to 60. So again, I want to make sure that however many clicks or the angle that I have it set at, I've also got it set the same way on the screen. So if I know that I'm at 5 clicks, 50 degrees, I'll set it to 50 degrees so that I've got the right perspective and orientation on the screen. And then my downrange, my depth, what I will do is I'll set, if I'm fishing 20 feet of water, I'll set my depth scale to like 22 or 24 feet or something like that.
Gives you the, gives you the largest display and the best detail by far.
Yeah, and from there, it's just a matter of trial and error. We were talking earlier about some of the settings and playing around with it. You can't beat on the water as far as, playing around with your settings. You can't really mess things up. You might eventually get to the point where you might not remember what you did and things aren't working properly.
Take pictures of it.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Or the other thing, if you get really far down the rabbit hole, just restore default settings and start from scratch,
Dynamic contrast, go lower.
It all depends on how you want to view the screen. Like I said, if I don't mind living with a little bit more, clutter, you can set it higher or lower. It all depends if you want a really, really clean screen or if you want a little bit more detail. It's just the balance. For the most part, a lot of times I've had it where it's just off, or you can have it on. It's kind of like when you set your contrast mode for Mega 360, for example. I like to have my contrast set to low versus off. You might have a little bit more of a kind of a smoother, a little bit more buttery screen, if that's the right term. When you get your contrast, it does have that sharpness and that contrast. And actually the benefit of having a little bit more contrast is that you'll see things in the water column a little bit more, right? So some of the, suspended bait fish or targets or, things like that, you'll actually view that just by having, for 360, for example, in a low contrast versus contrast off, because it does pick up the water column anomalies and things a little bit easier. But that's something you just have to determine. Now that might change because, for example, what if you're fishing in the summertime and there's an algae bloom? Right? So you got to dial things back a little bit more because it's just getting blown out too much. And it can be the difference from, because of the wind, while you could be fishing on this shoreline and things are dialed in really good, then you get to the next shoreline and you wonder what the heck is going on. My screen's all green or I can't see anything, right? Well, because you got to adjust it, right? You're picking up all those things, and that's how sensitive these are, right? Is they can pick a lot. I mean, heck, if it can pick up, thermoclines, well, sure as anything, it's going to pick up, bait fish and floaties and bugs and algae blooms for sure. So, and we all know we get some decent algae blooms in some of the waters out here. Yeah, I was saying actually when we were mapping Lake of the Prairies years ago, I was telling someone earlier where I remember being in the middle of the lake and I was kind of looking up and it's like, I mean, I'm in 30 feet of water, near the channel, and I'm like, I thought I was gonna is there an island there or what's going on? But what it was is it was such a thick algae bloom that I can see the shorebirds walking on top of it, right in the middle of the lake. I'm like, yeah, it's a thick algae bloom. So anyway, that's one of the neat things. Questions?
The delay, what's the reason for that? Is that compared to like a flasher, when you're marking your jig?
Yeah. Well, there will be, it's the processing, right? So when you have the timing from your sonar, now all units are going to have a relative display. There's other units that I've seen that have a very noticeable display, but you might have a little bit of a display from the actual timing from that signal being processed through the transducer to display it. That's typically what it is. One of the things I will say about delay as it relates to like your 2D sonar, because some folks will say, especially for ice fishing, right, when you're talking a mechanical flasher versus an ice helix unit. Well, when delay was an issue, it typically related to, because you'll notice when you're using your open water mode, right? So you've got your side scrolling screen and you've got your RTS window. That's real-time sonar. So before units actually had RTS, and Hummingbird's had it for a long time now, what you're looking at is here's your vertical RTS window, which is your flasher. It's a vertical flasher bar. That is what's happening in real time. Everything scrolling to the side of it is your sonar history. Those are things that have already happened. So you'll notice particularly if you don't have an RTS window and you're only looking at your history, there will be a delay because you're just tracking your history. When you're using your ice helix unit, whether it's the full screen with the RTS window or just the flasher dial, your flasher dial is just it's a circular RTS window. So delay is not an issue when you're talking, because some folks might say, well, my mechanical flasher, there's no delay. No, whether it's a fiber optic LED versus a color TFT, it's the same difference as far as how that signal is being transmitted on the screen. So the issue of delay as it relates to, let's say, an ice helix unit's delay and a mechanical flasher, it's a non-issue. We're talking milliseconds kind of thing. So it's just a non-issue, especially with the technologies. And one of the reasons why you see the value that goes into helix units as a whole. Mechanical flasher units are certainly good units and they definitely have their place, but the reality is for the most part, you're going to use it for the 4, 5, or I guess this year 6, 7 months, of ice fishing season. But then it goes away for the rest of the season, right? The great thing with ice helix is that you have even more performance, even more features. You can use it all year long. You can use it as a portable unit in the summertime. You can use it on your boat, so it has an all-year multi-use configuration that just offers really, really good value. And then that kind of gets into mapping, which is kind of the next thing. And I guess really what I can say about mapping is that we have introduced our Lakemaster VX mapping. For those of you that fish some of the western lakes in Manitoba, or maybe you're making a trip out to Lake of the Woods, or you're fishing Lake Winnipeg, This year we actually introduced, or just last fall, we actually introduced our Lakemaster VX. This is more so for a future thing because there will be a time, probably in the not too distant future, where we will start to have some lakes in Saskatchewan. It's going to happen. Eventually you're going to see that, you know, we're going to, at some point, you know, have something out here that I think y'all are going to be happy with. But it definitely takes boats on the water to do. But at some point down the road, you know, you're probably going to see some lakes happening out here. But for those of you that might be fishing Lake of the Prairies or, you know, some of the other bodies of water that we have, the great thing about Lakemaster VX, and actually just let me go to the map screen here so that you can see some examples of it here. This just happens to be Lake of the Prairies right here. What VX is that stands for vector, right? So as opposed to our previous Lakemaster maps, where in and of themselves, they're awesome maps, especially for our lakes that are actual boats on the water, 1 foot contour, HD surveyed. But when you look at the difference from the previous Lakemaster maps to the new vector maps, there is way more features, way more detail. I mean, I can zoom in here all the way at 100% zoom. You notice how quick that is. And look at the contour line. Well, it might be a little bit hard for you to see at the distance here, but watch when I scroll over to the contour. I'm actually zoomed in, like way over zoomed, as much as I can zoom. I can't zoom in anymore, and you can see that that contour line is buttery smooth. There's no jagged or, you know, misaligned, you know, contours or anything like that. The other great thing about it is that we actually have selectable color palettes. So you can go into your menu settings here. I can go into my chart settings. So whereas previously I did like the color palettes that you look at for the classic Lakemaster, right? So that kind of intuitive white to blue, blue being the deeper water. I like that classic color palette. But certainly there isn't, you know, when you look at Autochart Live, because especially for bodies of water where we don't have, you know, lakes that are surveyed, well, that's a great thing with Autochart Live. And we've all used it, and it's an awesome tool for you to be able to mark out spots. And I've surveyed entire lakes with Autochart Live. You can actually select various color palettes. So Lakemaster VX gives you the ability to have selectable color palettes. The other neat thing that you can do is you've actually got Smart Strike built in. And what Smart Strike is it might sound a little bit hokey, but if you're on a particular body of water, you can select your body of water. So let's say you're going to Lake of the Prairies. You select your target species, you select your time of year, you select all these parameters, sunny, cloudy, all these different things depending on how much you want to have it set up. And what it's actually going to do is based on those parameters and the conditions that you set, it's going to show kind of in a magenta colors those areas on the lake that those might be spots you want to check out. And really all it's doing is it's establishing a pattern for you. I've used it when I fished a new body of water, particularly some of the areas on Lake of the Woods that I hadn't fished before, and it's like, okay, I'll check those out. It gets you started. The other neat thing is that when you are starting to establish a pattern based on the conditions that you're catching those fish, is plug that into Smart Strike, because that used to be a separate product. Now it's actually built into the Lakemaster VX maps. So it's included with it. So plug in that pattern that you're starting to establish, and then it's going to give you other examples, you know, based on what you plugged into the unit. And I've done that. I remember pre-fishing for some of the bass tournaments, and it showed me a couple spots where it's like, yeah, okay, I never really fished there before. Sure enough, we went there, pulled up to the spot, and we started catching a few fish. So it certainly has its place. So Smart Strike is another feature. The other great thing that it has here is I can show you some of the functions here where there's also chart presets, particularly when you're navigating bodies of water. You know, when you have this much detail on the map, especially, like I said, some of the bodies of water like Lake of the Woods, there's a lot of islands and routes and all that. I mean, you can get lost pretty easy. Well, because of all that information, I'm pretty used to seeing what I see, you know, what I see on the screen there. I just use the one view and that's it. But certainly if you want to have a cleaner map view, I can actually set up my chart presets where watch what happens when I go to navigation. I've actually gone in here and I've taken the map so that it basically mirrors your classic paper map color palette. I've taken the contour interval and I've gone from a high density to a low density, so you still have really good detail. But what it does is it basically just cleans up the map. So you're only looking at, you know, essential detail on the map. So while you're navigating, some folks might say, well, that's great, I'll use my Lakemaster map, but then what I'll do is I'll toggle back and forth between my Navionics. Or you don't have to do that. Just toggle back and forth between your chart view, right? Or if you prefer, for example, you know, your Autochart Live color palette, right? Here you go. Again, this is on Lake of the Prairies right here, and you can see that classic. Now you've got the lake entirely mapped, and if you like that Autochart Live color palette, you have that option as well. There's a product that we have, there's a standard Lakemaster VX, and then there's also the Lakemaster VX Premium. For the most part, I'd say go with the Premium map, particularly if you want to have some of the more advanced features, because when you look at Premium, what it actually has is it has a feature called Shaded Relief. And what Shaded Relief is watch what happens when I go into the settings here, into chart settings. I'm actually going to go to contours, and I'm going to turn the contour lines off. So when I turn the contour lines off, which you'll see on the screen here, particularly when I zoom in a little bit, is there's no contour lines, but you can actually see the shading here, because it's adding shaded relief relative, you know, to the gradient or the depth. So it actually fills in some of that detail within the contours and the way it also blends the colors. Now, you're not going to typically use it in this type of view, but it shows you really what the benefits of shaded relief actually gives you. So I'll turn those contour lines back off, and I'll show you one more thing here.
Similar to how you'd perceive it on like Google Maps.
That's exactly it. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to chart options here. Let me go to depth and contours. And you can see how easy it is to set some of these settings. Is that you'll also notice is that having aerial imagery. This is a great thing with the premium chart, is because you actually have aerial imagery now. Now with that, I'll show you one other thing that's really cool. Just because this happens to be a clear body of water, and it really illustrates what I'm talking about here. Basically what I'm doing is I'm giving you a really big tease here, so when we do start getting maps out this way, this is going to be some of the features. But of course, if you're fishing, you know, in Manitoba and some of the waters that we have here, check this out. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go into my settings here. I'm actually going to go into my layers. And I can adjust the transparency from what you see on the map, adjust the transparency into the layer of the aerial imagery. So watch what happens when I take my shaded relief and drop it down a little ways there. All right, watch what happens when the map resets here. What do you notice is, oops, go back to that area, is you can see here is that, check this out, you can still see your contour lines, but now you're actually, because of the aerial imagery that we have on the lake here, you can actually see all the weed edges, you can see the sandbars. If I zoom in on these reefs right here, you can actually see, well, you won't be able to see, but I can see right now, there's a couple dots right there. Well, those are actually the marker buoys, you know, that are on those reefs, particularly when you're talking about docks and, you know, different, I mean, anything that you see in the water, if you're fishing a weed bed or something like that. So I can actually adjust how that transparency layer is, and I can be fishing a body of water here. If I want to kind of harden it up a little bit more, you can see I can still see through the map, but now I get colors on the map. So not only do you have shaded relief, you've got aerial imagery, and you can adjust that layer, that transparency. So this is pretty darn cool. So if any of you do happen to, you know, be fishing in Manitoba, I have a list, or these lists right here, where I think there's, at this point, there's about over 150 high definition bodies of water, you know, that we have in Manitoba. And of course, the Manitoba cart also includes the entirety of Lake of the Woods. So if any of you do plan on making a trip out to Lake of the Woods, don't be afraid of navigating, because the entire, you know, Lake of the Woods is actually charted with Lakemaster mapping. This is compatible with Helix G3 and newer units, because it does take a level of processing, right? It's like, well, I got a G2 unit. Well, the reality is theoretically it probably still, they could have made it work, but then you don't want to have any lag or any sort of performance issues. We want these maps to be able to perform exactly how they should be. We got to have a cutoff at some point. So G3 and newer for Helix, and then all Solix and Apex units is where these maps are going to be compatible. So like I said, an amazing product. I've used it a fair bit since it came out. What you're also going to notice too is that when you do purchase a Lakemaster VX map, is that we also have our new One Boat Network app. This is actually replacing the FishSmart app. Hence One Boat Network, whether it's your Raptor functions, your Talon functions, your iPilot or iPilot Link functions, as well as your mapping. When I go into my chart view right here, so with my subscription, all of the maps that you have, you actually have all of the maps for Canada here. So everything that you see on the screen here, you've actually got on the One Boat Network app with all the same features and functionalities. So you can study the maps, you can download maps for offline use, which is really cool. So you do get, when you purchase the Lakemaster VX, is you actually get a voucher, a coupon voucher for a 1-year free subscription, because this is actually subscription based. I think it's only, if I'm not mistaken, like $32.99 or $39 or something like that, which is pretty cheap for an annual subscription, because you get access to all the maps. Eventually, as more lakes get added, you know, they're going to be on here as well too. So like I said, hang tough. We will, at some point, I think you're going to like what you're going to see. I can't get into specifics, but I got a pretty good hunch that, you know what, we're going to start, you know, finding a way to, you know, getting some lakes out here and, you know, perhaps in the next foreseeable future, you know, look at actually having a Saskatchewan product that you can have with a lot of those bodies of water. So fingers crossed, I'd say that there's a good chance we're going to start to see something like that coming down the road. So hang in there. It'll happen.
I really like that you could establish landmarks with the topographical.
Absolutely.
See stuff like houses, cabins.
Yeah, and for certain applications too, you know, whether it's docks, actually I can drop this back down again, particularly when you go back down to the launch area here. You can see from the launch and the parking lot right here, just there in town. So I'll just zoom in. You can see that I still have my map view, but there you go.
So
There's the docks, the launches. Yeah, absolutely. Really neat stuff. But I mean, we realize, you know, mapping is kind of the next frontier. I mean, it's amazing when you look at our 2D chirp sonar, our Mega DI, our Mega SI, Mega 360, Mega Live. You know what? Autochart Live is still very much, you know, a functional, you know, practical option, even to supplement some of the existing maps that are available, but particularly on bodies of water, you know, where there is very limited mapping. You know, you can go and you can basically map out that area. And I remember, you know, doing some chats in the past about, you know, mapping an Autochart Live. So it's certainly not being replaced. It definitely has its place, especially on bodies of water that we don't have surveyed. But in time, I think we're probably going to start seeing some maps spread out to other areas of Canada because, you know, we understand the importance of it, of having good detailed maps, not only for fishing, but also for just simple navigation and safety, right?
Say, do you ever see them expanding that? Like I know lots of people put their units in their side-by-sides and trucks and stuff. Do you ever think they'll expand that topographical to where it works outside of just lake regions?
I think it's probably going to stick to just lakes. That's really what Humminbird is. We're not a, you know, we're sort of not, you know, land-based navigation, and the reality is for any of that sort of stuff, or particularly with vehicles, you know, between your mobile devices and those uses, there's so many different options that people are looking for land-based navigation. We focus on the marine end of things. We want to be able to provide the best marine map. So unless there's a base map, I mean, I can go into, there's basic stuff here, but you're not really going to get any sort of, like if you're going to a hunting camp or something like that, you're not really going to get any, you know, sort of topography. But when you get into certain areas, the base map that it has here, you'll notice that, I mean, I can zoom in on Winnipeg and it's got the various streets and markers and numbers and, you know, all that sort of stuff. You want to go, there you go, there's all the streets, it has the names. So here's right there, there's downtown Winnipeg. This was actually one of the other areas that me and one of our other teammates here ended up surveying. So there you go, downtown Winnipeg, Portage and Main. You'd actually be surprised the amount of structure that's in the Red River, so it's pretty cool.
Well, how far fish finders have come in the last 10 years.
Yeah. So, but yeah, there's a lot of neat stuff out there, and you know, certainly it's going to expand and evolve a little bit further. I'm really exciting. You know, mapping for me is just one of those things because I've just been so involved in it. You know, to be able to be on a body of water, particularly one that doesn't have any sort of, you know, depth map at all, and to actually see it being created right in front of you, right? It's one of the neatest things when you're using Autochart Live to be able to create something and see it that has never really been viewed before, right? So.
Absolutely.
That's it. Absolutely.
So will Autochart Live work in conjunction with?
Oh, for sure.
Will it?
Yeah. You're going to find that any of the HD surveyed waters that we have, you know, our Lakemaster surveyed lakes that are actual boats on the water surveyed, you'd be pretty hard pressed. It's like if you want to go to Lake of the Prairies, because I remember when we came out with that and there was a guy that messaged me, or I might have been talking to him at one of the in-store events, and he's like, nah, I auto-charted it and it's not going to be any better than whatever, you know, that's all good. I mean, check it out. And so he ended up, you know, auto-charting some of the areas, and then I bumped into him a little while later, and he came up to me and he says, yeah, actually that map's pretty good. It's like, well, yeah, it is. We know that our HD survey maps that are surveyed, there's a certain process to actually do them to try to get the best detail. Now, of course, there may be the odd area, like anything. You know, the boat's off this, you know, position off a little bit, and maybe you auto-chart it and you see a little bit of a nub or a little bit of a difference, but certainly you can decide for yourself. You're not going to redo the whole lake, but I mean, if you have your pet spot, if you have this is your money spot right here, and you want to run a little pass over it and Autochart Live it, because you can layer your Autochart Live over top of any of the existing maps. Have at her. See if you notice any differences. You're probably going to find it's going to be pretty much the same. But certainly Autochart Live is a technology that is still relevant, that is still available, particularly because we're not going to get to all the bodies of water. And you might have some northern lakes, or maybe you got a smaller lake out somewhere, or a little electric only lake or something like that, right? You know, that's the nice thing about it. I mean, I've surveyed a lot of different bodies of water in my, you know, Old Town pedal kayak with my Helix 5, you know, sitting on it. Some of the lakes in the Duck Mountains, that's one of the things that we did is, you know, I went in there and surveyed some of the, you know, the outboard lakes or the gas lakes that you can go to. And then I did a separate trip there with my kayak, and I surveyed some of the electric only lakes, right? You know, like what is it, you know, West Blue and 2 Mile and so on and so forth, you know what I mean? It's really cool to be able to have something like that, and you know, amazing data, amazing functions. So we'll get there, but like I said, hang tough. I think in time, in the not too distant future, we're going to start seeing some stuff happening out this way. So exciting. Remember when I said we'd keep this as an open forum and just kind of answer questions and all?
I knew it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when we get started, right? So, but certainly, any questions at all? Like I said, we wanted to have this as an opportunity to, you know, bounce a couple things back and forth, you know.
How good a battery do you need
Sorry?
in the boat?
Sorry?
How good a battery do you need in the boat with the Mega Live?
That's actually a good question. Mega Live itself doesn't use a lot of power. It's only basically like it's less than an amp. I would say that for your electronics overall, the bigger consideration is particularly when you're using more units and especially bigger screen units. The issue that you might run into is if you have everything connected to your house battery or your, you know, your starting battery, the most common thing that I find is that people will typically have a starting battery that just kind of does the job, right? But when you're using your radio, when you're using your live well, when you're using your bilge, and then now you're adding another 2, 4, 5, 6 amps, whatever, which is a steady draw, keep in mind, your cranking battery is a cranking battery. It is not a deep discharge type of battery. So when you're putting those types of demands on it, the warning sign that you're going to notice is when you go to turn the key and then you start getting voltage warnings on the screen, or even worse, when you turn the key and then the screen flashes and it shuts off and you have to turn it on again. I'm telling you right now, let that be an indicator to where you either got to charge your cranking battery, and most people are going to say, well, I don't need to charge it, the alternator charges it. Well, no, you got to realize that it's always going to be in a diminished state if, just like your trolling motor, you don't charge it at the end of the day. If you charge it at the end of the day, every time you go on the water, just as you do, you know when you leave that dock in the morning that your battery is going to be fully charged. Okay, you do that, you're going to be in a much better position. If you have it where this flashes and shuts off and you don't do anything about it, whether you charge your battery or whether you get a bigger battery, because if you have too many demands on your battery, maybe you don't have a big enough cranking battery. Ideally, especially if you get into more accessories and bigger units and stuff like that, what I actually do recommend is having a separate power source. There's a lot of different batteries you can get. You can get a separate lithium battery that's really light and doesn't take up a lot of space, you know, if the budget warrants it. But that is good, clean power. These units, the processors in the units, they require good, clean power. Okay, what'll happen is most of the glitches and freezes and different things are usually power related. I mean, it could be rigging, it could be wires, connections, things like that, but most of the time it's because you have insufficient power and these things are starting to glitch a little bit because you're not giving it the power requirements that it needs to process all the stuff that's going on. If you have your screen flash and shut down too many times, you will blow the board in the unit. And then the next thing that's going to happen is you're going to have to bring it into the service center and they're going to have to replace the board. Okay, certainly if it happens under warranty, it's a warranty situation, but they're not cheap. If it happens outside of warranty, you're going to need to replace the main board on that unit there. So if that does happen and you're getting voltage warnings, or even worse, and it shuts down on you, do something about it. Don't just live with it and, oh, it's fine, I just turn it back on. Do that too many times, it's going to cost you a little bit of money to get the board replaced probably. Yeah. Sorry, you had a question there?
Can you make like a multiple screens on that unit?
Absolutely.
And plug it like a 360 with a Mega Light?
Depending, when you go to your views, this is the neat thing about it. Now with Helix, it has preset screens. So typically your full screens of all the functions, split screens of all the functions, and then for some of the screens, you can have a 3 position or 4 position screen, depending, you know, what it gives you. With Solix and Apex, there's presets that you can set up, or you'll notice here, I can go into my views. What I can do is I can actually go in and set my palette. So let's say I've got a 4-screen view here and I want to have my map screen here. I want to have my sonar screen there, down imaging and side imaging right there. You'll notice that in the 4 screen splits, you'll notice that your Mega Live and your 360 are not available as options here because they do require at least a half a screen, right? So you can certainly have your map screen in your Mega Live or your 360 in your map screen or different things like that. But some of the presets are only compatible with some of the relative screen splits, okay? So again, I can change it and go into a half screen and have my Mega Live, and then I can go maybe my, map screen and my 2D sonar. So I can set this up here, I can save it. There's a preset that I set up right now. Now I can go to that screen. The cool thing when you look at Apex and Solix is that I can quickly, for whatever functions I want to change, so if I want to use my Mega Live screen here, or let's say I'm using my Mega Live, you notice that if I push and hold the button or I 2-finger tap, now right away I blow up the screen where I've got a full view here and I've got all the features and functions of Mega Live. I want to go back to my, I can just 2-finger tap it, go back to my full screen. Or a lot of times if you're using your 2D, your down imaging, isn't this great where, okay, now I'm navigating? So sometimes what I'll do is I don't have to worry about setting up all of these screen presets, right? What I'll do is I'll typically set up 1 or 2 screens that is easy for me to toggle back and forth, because what I can do here is when I go to my views, these are all my favorite screens. I can just tap those and then it brings up the next one. But if I'm already here, I'm navigating, I don't need to see my sonar while I'm navigating. I just want to have my full map screen. Boom, there's a full map screen that I've got. And then when I go back to my fishing spot, okay, so now I'm navigating, zoom in and out, I'm driving on the lake. I want to go back to the other screens that I'm using. There you go. You can do the same thing here with this view. When I push this, this toggles through all the different screens. So right now it's on the full sonar screen. I can push and hold that button. So basically anything you can do on the touch, you can also do with the buttons. The great thing with cross touch is that you still have buttons as well as your touch screens, because originally when touch screen kind of became a thing, in some manufacturers what they did is they got rid of, the buttons. I always thought that it's like, no, don't do that, because any of you'll know what I'm talking about. I mean, if you're driving down, Last Mountain Lake or Diefenbaker and it's 3-footers, 5-footers, 8-footers, I don't know. You can't, if you're trying to zoom in and out, you can't do it. What you need to do is you need to grip the unit here, use it as leverage, and you can literally access. I can cursor here, I can zoom, I can do whatever I need to do, and I can access all the functions. I want to push and hold that. There you go. You can't do that on a touch screen, especially in rough conditions. So that's the great thing with having both functions.
Do the split screen work the same on Solix?
Absolutely, yeah.
Same setup?
Yeah, the functionality between Apex and Solix are actually very similar. Apex has an even higher resolution screen, best in class resolution, but really the main difference is your dual Ethernet. So if I were to turn this around here, you'll see all these other connections, right? So you've actually got even additional transducers you can use, but you got your dual Ethernet and your HDMI in and out if you wanted to use those functions.
So you plug like a 360 and Mega Live to the one unit.
Oh, sure, if you wanted, yeah. Now 360, Mega 360, where previously it was an Ethernet connection, 360 is basically a transducer now, right? So you basically have your Y cable, you plug your MSI, for example, in one of the connections, your Mega 360 transducer, you plug that into the unit, and that would be basically your transducer connection. Mega Live is an Ethernet connection. If you have additional Mega Live accessories, whether it's iPilot Link or you want to network it to another unit, you may or may not need the 5-station Ethernet port. Again, what I like about Apex, although it is up there a little bit more in price, but best in class resolution, HDMI in and out. Well, it's above this. It's above the Solix, right?
It's more than a little bit.
Yeah. Well, a little bit's a relative term, so I know what you mean. So the thing about that is that you're getting all that additional functionality. With Mega Live, I can just basically daisy chain it. So I actually wouldn't even need an Ethernet hub. You can take your Mega Live, plug it in, take this, connect it to the next unit, however you wanted to do it. Or, like I said, if you've got a Helix unit in the boat, you can have one of these units here and you can network it to your Helix. Now, it won't share sonar in terms of your traditional sonar. It will clone your Mega Live as long as it's a Mega Live compatible unit, but it will also share your waypoints. So you'll see whatever waypoints you have in your Helix, they're going to show up on your Apex or your Solix if you have it networked to the hub and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Can you mix Apex with Solix or?
Certainly, yeah, because that's actually the way that I had it, because I've been running Solix for the last few years. I recently got the Apex units, and because they are, sort of, parallel platforms, if you want to call it that. What's that?
Helix too?
Helix you can, but again, you're not going to be able to share sonar data per se. You're only really going to be able to share nav data in terms of your waypoints and things. Ideally, insofar as networking sonar, let's say you've got a side imaging unit and you want to be able to view your SI or your DI, on your other unit that you have in your boat, as long as it's compatible. Helix to Helix, Solix / Apex to Solix Apex, you know what I mean? So, because they're parallel operating systems being Helix. So if you want to do more of an all-around network system, I would advise that if you've already got a Helix platform, stick to a Helix platform. If you've got a Solix, or maybe you're looking at changing over or incorporating a Solix, then you kind of look at Solix to Solix. You just have more features and functionality, and like I said, some of the additional things that you can do with it, to be able to network it is just a little more seamless because they're a parallel operating system in a way. Yep. But anyway, yeah, we appreciate it. We're going to hang out for a little bit here, but we really appreciate you guys coming out and being able to chat with you, and it's certainly great to be able to meet with you all face to face too. So thank you so much for coming out. Really appreciate the time.
You guys can all go buy an Apex now.
There you go. Yeah, sorry about that.
Line up the till, we'll take you on. Thank you very much for coming out. Thank these guys. I mean, it's Darrin makes a trip every year when we do this, and does a hell of a job. And
Thank you,
and
Darrin.
Layne is.
Thanks to you, Layne, as well too. Appreciate it, and everybody. Yep.
These guys are getting into this stuff. It's pretty cool, but it's great to have these guys here and help you guys catch more fish.
Thanks,
Great.
Craig.
Pass these videos too.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Glad somebody likes them.
Yesterday, maybe
Makes you jealous.
I did something on Humminbird or whatever.